They say that when you're onto a good thing, you should stick to it. They also say that familiarity breeds contempt. We've seen the HiFiMan Susvara Unveiled. We've seen the HiFiMan Aria Unveiled. And now, there's the HiFiMan HE1000 Unveiled. Are HiFiMan just taking their old drivers and sticking them in new housings? Is this laziness or innovation? Given the very similar tuning in almost all of HiFiMan's current lineup, is there any point in buying one HiFiMan model over another? Yeah, there is. The HE1000 Unveiled might be the very best of the entire HiFiMan range right now. Whether it's best for you though, that's another question, so let's deconstruct that. The HE1000 Unveiled, or HEKU as you might sometimes see it referred to as, is a $2,699 headphone. For those in the USA, that means it's going to be about $6,342 after tariffs. But let's not get political. Actually, according to the HiFiMan website, they'll be shipping models for North America from the USA, and so I'm not sure what that's going to mean for tariffs, but you might be spared from huge markups. Either way though, let's talk headphones, not economics. The HEKU are a pretty easy headphone to drive when it comes to power. They have an impedance of 28 ohms and a sensitivity of 95 decibels per milliwatt. That means a headphone amp with just 50 to 60 milliwatts of power at 32 ohms is going to have plenty of power to drive the HE1000 Unveiled to a suitable level of loudness. As always though, with premium headphones like these, quality is far more important than quantity. That's of course assuming that you've got enough power to start with. Once you have enough, it's all about quality. And if you want to understand more about how to work out if you have enough power, I've got a video coming up very soon on that exact topic, so hit the subscribe button if you want to know more. And so the biggest challenge you're going to have with the HE1000 Unveiled is not finding a headphone amp that's able to power them, it's finding a headphone amp that's going to be able to extract their maximum performance, because they're setting a pretty high bar for that. Once you decide which of the three included headphone cables you're going to use, either 3.5mm, 6.3mm, or 4-pin XLR, you'll also need to uncover the drivers by removing the back magnetic plates. That looked way harder than it should have because of the way I was trying to do it for the camera. These are here to protect the drivers from stray metallic objects being pulled into the magnetic field, because those that you can see there, those bars, are the magnets. Having a screw, washer, paperclip, or other metallic fragment get too close to these magnets is a death sentence for these unveiled headphones. That said, you're unlikely to have problems with these if you keep them on a headphone stand, in other words up off the desk surface, and if you replace the covers after each listen. But when it comes back to listening, once the covers are removed and you place these on your head, you're going to get the same fantastic comfort from these as you get from headphones like the Arias, the Susvaras, and the previous HE1000s. And then there's the sound. These aren't a particularly different tuning than the HE1000 SEs that debuted for $3,500 once upon a time. In other words, the HE1000 Unveiled are a more affordable headphone when we consider the new prices. They also sound better. The tuning of these might be very, very similar, but the HE1000 SE sounds grainy by comparison to the Unveiled version. There's more attack, but less feel from the bass and the percussion on the HE1000 SE. What I mean by that is that they sound a bit more aggressive, the HE1000 SE, but you don't feel the air moving inside the cups in quite the same way that you do from the Unveiled version. Basically, the HE1000 Unveiled has taken the same sound of the SE and just made it better across the board. They have an excellent sense of feel on bass and percussion, and the vocal presentation is also very detailed and with a good sense of presence in the vocal region or the mid-range region. The HE1000 SE was a fantastic headphone, and it is especially now at the bargain price that it's reached, but the HE1000 Unveiled is clearly superior to my ears. In fact, it was sounding so good that I started to wonder if there was any point in the Susvara Unveiled. Was this just the same headphone in a different shape? I couldn't remember hearing anything from my time with the Susvara Unveiled that made me think it was that much better than the much cheaper HE1000 Unveiled. And this is where things get extra interesting for those that like to compare frequency response graphs. Looking at the graphs of these two headphones, they're quite similar. Similar enough that you might expect them to sound almost identical. When you put them on though, they don't sound identical. It raises some interesting questions about which differences come from tuning alone and which differences come from the responsiveness and the performance of the actual driver. Still listening to Worst in Me, the Susvara Unveiled is a little bit less weighty in its sound. It's got less sense of bass and body to it. You can see it in the graph. That makes the treble seem more prominent too, because it's not as well balanced by the bass as it is in the HE1000 Unveiled. I felt like maybe the vocal was a bit better refined and controlled on the Susvara Unveiled, but it wasn't a big enough difference for me to be certain on that particular track. On In the Wind, the bass weight and impact from the Susvara Unveiled was fantastic, but I still felt that the overall tonal balance was better from the HE1000 Unveiled because it's got a better sense of weight in the bass, which helps to balance off with the slightly enhanced treble. I still wasn't sure at this point why I would recommend the Susvara Unveiled to anybody given the massive leap in price. And then I heard it. The HE1000 Unveiled delivered great detail, articulation and texture on Rango 2. The Susvara Unveiled was clearly a crisper and drier sound on the very same track. Not by a lot, but by enough of a margin. What really stood out now though was not the tonal differences between these two, not the things that obviously show up in a frequency response graph. What stood out were the extra sounds I could hear and hear clearly on the HiFiMan Susvara Unveiled, but not so much on the HE1000 Unveiled. Sounds like an extra pluck of a string a couple of times early on in Rango 2. Another one that sounded like somebody moving a heavy keychain. It was metallic and irregular. When I returned to the HE1000 Unveiled, those sounds were still there, but they were less available to hear. Perhaps those sounds are masked by a little bit of extra bass from the HE1000 Unveiled, or maybe spending $5,300 more on the Susvaras. Yes, I said $5,300 more. Maybe that's getting you a high-performance driver that's able to start and stop the sound waves with more precision. Maybe it's delivering even greater accuracy on the transients of the sounds that our brains use to precisely understand the positioning of sounds in space and their timbre. And maybe there's an argument for spending more and getting the Susvara Unveiled. Certainly, with both of them here on my desk, the Susvara Unveiled is the headphone I'd reach for to hear deeper into the music. But even with the Susvara Unveiled here, the HE1000 Unveiled is the headphone I would reach for a more balanced tonality, in my opinion, and a more enjoyable general listening experience. That's for most genres though. I must say that for classical music and other genres where maybe you don't need that slightly fuller bass, the Susvara Unveiled is sublime. The same could be said if you have a richer, warmer and fuller sounding amplifier, for example some tube amps. But I know that I'll be recommending the HE1000 Unveiled for almost all people before the Susvara Unveiled. Spend the extra $5,300 on an epic source chain for the HE1000 Unveiled and you'll be enjoying every single musical moment that follows. Or at least, that is, unless you happen to find another headphone that's even cheaper and just as good, depending on your tastes. Before I tell you about that headphone, I want to quickly mention that if you prefer a slightly different sound than what I've described here, you can always swap the pads to tune the sound of the headphones. Or at least you could if HiFiMan hadn't gone and changed the mounting system on the new Unveiled range. Having said that, I'm sure Tonally Audio, the sponsor of this video, will catch up soon with pads available for the Aria Unveiled, HE1000 Unveiled, and hopefully Susvara Unveiled too. While we're waiting for that, I just wanted to remind you that Tonally make pads for all different sorts of headphones, more than 14 brands in fact, as well as a modular cable system to reduce your cable clutter, and even carry cases to protect your precious cans. As sponsors of this video, they've kindly offered a 10% discount for you on any purchase of Tonally Audio products. Just use the code PassionForSound10 at their checkout. So head over to tonallyaudio.com and see if they've got anything over there that can enhance your musical journey. But now, let's get back to that headphone I teased just a moment ago. The Headphone 2 GT was probably not the headphone you expected me to be talking about here, but it makes a really interesting contrast with the HE1000 Unveiled. The HE1000 Unveiled sounded great on this track, as you'd expect from everything I've said so far. The drums had good attack and crispness without sounding harsh. The electric piano sounded focused and present in the mix, but it might have been slightly overshadowed by the rhythm section at times. Swapping to the Headphone 2 GT provided an immediately better sense of the room the recording was in. There was also more weight and fullness in the bass. Some might describe it as a touch slow compared to the HE1000 Unveiled, but that's only by comparison. Both of these headphones are on the faster side of sound delivery. Neither I think would be described as slow in the bigger picture of all headphones. Thinking about tonal balance, both of these headphones are actually quite similar, but the GT's top end is a little tiny bit darker. But that's not to say they're lacking in energy. The snare was actually snappier and more resonant from the GT. And I also found that the electric piano held its position in the mix better from the GTs, rather than having to try to fight over the bass and the drums. Really, both of these headphones were very enjoyable. The Headphone 2 GT is more revealing of the room and the ambience in a recording, but it's also a little bit thicker and smoother sounding by comparison. Again, it's not a thick, smooth headphone, it's just by comparison to the Unveiled. The HE1000 Unveiled initially seems more technically resolving and articulate, but I think it's really just about the tuning being a bit leaner and a bit brighter. Where the HE1000 Unveiled creates a greater sense of space between the sounds, the Headphone 2 GT creates a greater sense of the overall space within the soundstage. Sounds from the Headphone 2 GT are still well separated, but perhaps they're also more coherently knitted together. As you probably gathered, it's very hard to go wrong with either of these headphones, but I find myself preferring the Headphone 2 GT by a very small margin. To take that a step further, on a pop mix like 22, the Headphone 2 GT is less sibilant and a more relaxing listen while still being very technical and resolving. I feel like the Headphone 2 GT is the headphone that I would enjoy and perhaps you would enjoy across a big wide range of genres, recording qualities and even source chains, even if it is a little bit heavier and therefore not quite as comfortable. And that brings us back to the wonderful world of subjectivity in this hobby. Neither of these headphones is clearly better. I just slightly prefer the Headphone 2 GT, but that's just me on my amps. And so if you're looking for one of the very best, perhaps most technically capable and comfortable headphones that you can buy for under $3,000, look no further than the HE1000 Unveiled. As I said earlier, I would recommend the HE1000 Unveiled over the Susvara Unveiled in most situations, partly because of its tonal balance, which I think is better, but also because of its much lower price tag. These are a truly premium headphone and one that I would recommend to anybody that enjoys the HiFiMan sound. If you liked most of what I had to say about them, but maybe you wished that they had a slightly warmer, richer sound, then the other headphone you probably should think about is the HiFiMan Aria Unveiled. Watch this video next to understand why I'm excited to see if the new HiFiMan Aria Unveiled marks a change in tuning philosophy from HiFiMan. If it does, we're in for some great things. For now though, I want to say a huge thanks to YouTube channel members, also to channel Patreon members, and of course to those of you who leave super thanks on videos like this one. And until next time, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here again soon on Passion for Sound.